friends and sane persons, and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. My name is Kyle, and Wednesday Whimsy is a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game, a top 10 list, or some other game usually related topic, something that happens to be on my mind. Well, something that's been on my mind a lot lately is big games. Big games. Games, we sometimes refer to them as a table hog, games that just take up so much space. So much space on your table. I have some games that I've played that I have an enormous table. In fact, I have two fairly large game tables. You'll see I have one kind of right over there behind me. There. And I have another one upstairs that's even bigger than that. And yet, there are some games that I struggle to find enough space to fit. And I would especially struggle if I had a normal sized table. Or I'll especially struggle if I have a game that I'm playing with more than two players. Some of these games just take up so much space. And that has nothing to do with whether the game's good or not. And so I just decided to make a list about games that are table hogs, but I at least hopefully think that they're worth the table space. So they're kind of in order, but not a super strong order. We're just going to go through them, and I will hopefully not take up too much time, but give them a little talk about, and I'll tell you what I think about them, and you'll know about games that you won't be able to fit on your table. Anyway, let's get going with number 10. And let me, of course, open the screen sharing here so I can show you a little bit about these games. My number 10 is a brand new game, the newest game on the list. It just arrived, but I played it on the cruise as well, and it is just one that's been so fascinating for me. This is Galactic Cruise. So Galactic Cruise is a game in which, well, you are running a galactic cruise. You're essentially running a cruise ship and a cruise ship company, and you're trying to plan the entertainment. You're trying to, there you go. Look at that huge table. You're trying to manage your economy and hire the right kinds of workers and build technologies, but ultimately sell cruise tickets to passengers, give them a great time, and hopefully get lots of money, points, and reputation. This game is enormous. It's got huge player boards. You can kind of see them. Right there. It's got a huge regular board you can see in the middle of the table. There's a possibility of a play mat, which I think is even bigger. This game, I actually have it set up on the table upstairs right now, and I think I can play it with four on my big table, but it'll be a stretch. It'll be a very tight fit. Anyway, it's a really fun game, but you're going to need a bigger boat. Yep, I went there. Anyway, that's my number 10, Galactic Cruise. Let's go to number 9. Let's try that again. Let's go to number 9. Well, for some reason I'm not finding it. Oh, it's in a new place. There we go. Number 9. My number 9 is a game that is... The fact that it is as big as it is actually makes me less likely to get it to the table. Because not only is it big in terms of the amount of table space it takes, but it's in several boxes, and that's going to be a common theme here. But this game, it just takes up so much space that I'm reluctant to get it out. When I do, I will play it a lot, and I'll really enjoy it. And you'll actually find that lots of games on here end up being dungeon crawl type games. Those ones just seem to be masters of table creep. But this game, my number 9, is Chronicles of Drunagor. And it's not one I talk about that much, just because I don't know why. It's a fascinating game with a fascinating system of character development and interesting-ish stories, a very long campaign, and that's another reason why it's a little bit less likely to come out. But it's a big game, and actually you use these plastic trays to kind of set it up, and so you'll have plastic trays, and then you'll have little cardboard mats between them, And it makes a very interesting 3D aspect. You've also got these huge player trays that you're managing, and they'll sort of keep track of your skills. And these cubes you're using are going to let you activate skills, and it's a fascinating system. But it is not small. It is not for the faint of heart. There you can kind of see it, set up here on a table in the middle of play. And this is a boss scenario, so it's somewhat smaller. But you could have, I mean, you might have 3 or 4 of these trays, sort of each with a connection piece. And it's really a big game with a whole lot of table presence. It looks great, and it's a lot of fun to play, but it's a table hog. Anyway, that's my number 9, Chronicles of Drunagor. Let's go, now that I know where it is, to my number 8. All right, my number 8 is, I tried not to sort of have multiple games from the same company. There's a company that just sort of prides itself on being table hogs, and that company is Chip Theory Games. I've talked a lot about the Elder Scrolls lately, but there's one game, and Too Many Bones I also really like, but there's a game that takes up even more space than both of those, and that game is my number 8, Cloudspire. Cloudspire is just huge. It has such a footprint. You've got these large kind of neoprene tiles, and you're going to build this map between the players, and you're going to be moving around it with tactical positioning. You're trying to destroy these towers to attack your opponent's gate. It's a fairly complicated game. It might be the most complicated of the Chip Theory games if I think about it, but it's just so big that it's hard to find a table that can play it. I pretty much have to play it on my upstairs table, and that one is one where I tend to sort of play lots of games. So this one doesn't get out that much because it's going to be a hard one to leave set up, and because it's such a chore to set up and relearn each time, it's one that I'd prefer to leave out and just play a lot of. Anyway, it's you can even get a playmat, as you can see, if it didn't take up enough space. You could have your neoprene pieces sitting on a neoprene playmat. You've also got these large player aids, which are great and tell you all your special abilities, but they take up space too. And this is just a simple 2-player game. If you add, more players, it's going to be sprawling off to either side of this thing. And it is just a huge game, a complicated one, but also a really fun one. My number 8, Cloudspire. Let's find my number 7. My number 7 is sort of a sentimental pick because it was the subject of my very first episode of Wednesday Whimsy, back when I still am kind of learning what I'm doing, but back in the early days of Wednesday Whimsy, this was the first game that I talked about. And it's a game that actually I've really been itching to play a lot lately, but haven't managed to get to the table. I had Victor over, and there was so much other new stuff that we didn't get around to it. But this game is a fantastic game about pirates. It is called Dead Reckoning. In Dead Reckoning, you're always going to use this sort of 12 tile. These are big old tiles. This kind of 12 tile setup with a little bit more. You see it's hanging off both sides of the table. Plus, you've got a large shipboard. There's also this battleship that you're going to throw cubes into to do the combat in the game. And so it's just going to take up a lot of space here. It's a really... I wonder what that is. It's just holding cubes. Or maybe that's from an expansion. I don't have that. That must be something from Etsy. Anyway, you can see it just takes up a lot of space. It's hard, actually. Not only is it hard to get onto a table, it's hard to kind of position players around where they can see things and interact meaningfully. You also, in addition to all of these, you have these boxes of transparent cards that are going to sit off to the side that are going to have other things that you can explore. There's really a whole lot going on here. It's not a light and easy game at all, but it's a really fun one. And it takes up a whole lot of space. That is my number 7, Dead Reckoning. Let's go to my number 6. My number 6 might be the one that takes up the most space. And the reason I say that is because it's a very undefined experience, and you just don't know where it's going to go. It's going to be a sprawling dungeon that you're going to be dealing with. And this is a huge game that I've spent a lot of time assembling pieces and having my friend paint them. This is Shadows of Brimstone. It's a very schlocky game. It's more focusing on the fun of the experience than the rules, but you're going to be some sort of Old West cowboys and you are venturing into a mine, and that mine is eventually going to, usually it's going to turn into something else, whether that be, a volcano or an icy wasteland or the belly of a huge beast or ancient Japan. But you've got this sprawling table full of these terrain tiles that the monsters are going to spawn on, you're going to explore, and you really never know when you're going to find the kind of end. And, and that can make it a little bit difficult to plan a space. I had to use this one when I was playing it a lot. I left it out on this huge banquet table upstairs before I even had my big game table, because it was just, first of all, it was a huge hassle to put away. This is not fitting on that table. This is a huge table for a demo, and they must be doing a specific small controlled demo scenario. This game can be as big and sprawling as you want it to be. And, there's a lot of rules too, and there's, you've also got to find and sort all of your minis. It's not going to be a small experience. This is one you want to have plenty of space for. Shadows of Brimstone. Let's go to number 5. My number 5 is another newer game. It came out late last year, and there were a couple of games that kind of fit this category that came out late last year. And although this was my number, I believe, 3 of 2024, and there were 2 games that I actually placed higher than this, this is the one I think is the biggest table hog of all of those games. Civolution was a big table hog too, but Unconscious Mind is something else. Unconscious Mind has, it's got these several kind of game boards in the middle. You've got sort of this worker placement spot, and then this city board, and then you've got a place for all these cards. Then each player has a large player board and this sort of cumbersome wheel that you're going to keep track of your resources on, and then yet another little sideboard to keep your patients and their dreams on. It's just huge. And I mean, I'm not convinced that I could set up a 4-player game of this on my table upstairs. So it is just an enormous, sprawling game, and I'll say maybe unnecessarily so. It does fit nicely back in its box, I'll give it that, but it is just such a big game that you're going to find that you'll have a lot of trouble finding a table that you can play it on. So it's a great game, a lot of fun, interesting theme, and just very well-designed game, but it is huge. Let's go on to an older game with number 4. So I said an older game. This is from 2019. It's not that old, but it was. It's a game that I know some people that I play a lot with have trouble fitting on their table to the point that they have to really play it on the floor. This game is. Oh, where's my banner? Tapestry. Tapestry is a sort of civilization-adjacent game where you are, I guess, kind of taking your civilization through history, but really you're moving up tracks and collecting points and trying to sort of exploit different kinds of ways to get those. Everyone has special abilities from a civilization. You've also got several kind of player-type boards that, weird pictures I'm finding. Several kind of player boards. There's one that you'll do, there we go. You've got a large board in the center, and then you've got your own individual player board, and you've got a map, and then you've got a civilization board off to the other side, and those kind of make up your area. And so each person's going to have those, plus you've got this large board in the middle, plus you've got these pieces you've got to store somewhere. I usually store them off the table because there's not enough room. And then you've got a place to put all these cards, and then there's other tiles and tokens that sit off to the side. This game really takes up a lot of space. And more and more with each player, obviously. I find it's a fantastic 2-player game for that reason, because it's much easier to get to the table physically. But it's a great game, a really interesting one. Just it's a huge game, and I wonder if this one could have been smaller. Let's go on to my number 3. All right, my number 3 is, I guess it should have been my number 2 because of its name. This is another dungeon crawl, and those, as I mentioned, those do tend to take up a lot of space. This one has large square tiles. It's more predictable than Shadows of Brimstone. This is Massive Darkness 2. And there's also Massive Darkness, but I don't have that one anymore. Massive Darkness 2 is kind of where it's at. This is a small scenario with only 2 tiles, but most of them are at least 4. And they're these large square tiles, kind of Zombicide style. In fact, this Zombicide could easily have fit on this list as well. They're actually a lot more similar in gameplay than some people might want to admit. But you're going to have a large kind of board, and then you have these large player trackers that keep track of all of your items and experience and character stats, but they also take up a lot of space. Plus, each player has some sort of sideboard or side gimmick that's going to help them use their own specific powers and abilities, and those take up a lot of space. Plus, you've got lots of minis, and you've got to put them somewhere. I mean, you can put the boxes off to the side, and I say boxes because there's no way you're fitting this into one if you have any of the expansions. It's a huge, sprawling dungeon crawl. It's a great one. It's a lot of fun, especially with 2. I'm sort of coming around that I don't love it solo, but with 2 players, it really rocks. Or more, but it's a great sort of cooperative dungeon crawl. Again, any of those large CMON games, Cthulhu Death May Die, Zombicide, any of them, Marvel Zombies, even Marvel United could have easily fit on this list, but Massive Darkness is probably my favorite of kind of that family of game, so that's why it's my number 3. Let's go on to number 2. My number 2 is kind of the first game that I ever saw that in its rule book told you need to map out your play space before you set this up. Make sure you have enough room. This is a really big game. It is one that I just love. It's still a 10 for me, even if it's been a little while since I played it. I've got to get this one back to the table, actually. And that is Dinosaur Island. So Dinosaur Island, and this is just a rendering, I guess. Delightful. It doesn't show it on the table, but you've got these sort of 3 player boards and areas for cards, and you've also got individual player, so game boards and then player boards. You're going to need 1 for each person plus some space in between, 1 of each of those. If you add the expansions, there's even a little bit more. And it's just going to take up a lot of space. This one where, I mean, I've deliberately not played it sometimes because it's going to take up so much space. It is, if you've got the space for it, it's a really fun game. It's there's sort of 3 ways to play. There's the short, which is too short, medium, which is just the right length, and long, which is too long. So pick a medium scenario. What you're doing is you are developing the gene sequences for dinosaurs, and then you are going to be building those dinosaurs, putting them in your park, hoping to attract tourists, and then also trying to keep people safe so that they don't die, because that costs you points. It's also tragic, but it costs you points. Here you can kind of see it, I guess, a little bit more of a... still looks like an online rendering. Anyway, actually, I'd love an online version of this game that's not on a crappy site like Tabletopia, but that's like on a board game arena. I'd love that. Anyway, it's a big game, takes up a lot of space. These people are being very space conscious. They're also playing it with 2. If they were to add a 3rd player, it would not be fitting on that table. So it is, it's a great big game. It's about dinosaurs. I guess it has to be. But that is my number 2. Let's go on to my number 1. My number one is, it's really the first thing I thought of. Now, there's a lot of honorable mentions I could put on this list. I've mentioned some already. Uh, for example, Ark Nova is a huge table hog, although I have gotten that on a tiny airport table, so I guess it no longer is. But this is a game that it's the first thing I think of when I think of a huge game. I'm wondering, did I do an episode on this one? I don't know. I've talked about it a little bit, though. Um, this is one of my favorite games to teach, just because it's such a fun, interesting game to teach, and it's one not a lot of people know or can teach well, so I feel like I can add value there. But I hate setting it up, and anyway, I'll break the suspense. It's Voidfall. Voidfall is a large space game. With 2 players, it takes up a lot of space. With 3 or 4, you're going to have a very difficult time finding a table that can hold it all efficiently, or even at all, because you've got these large cardboard terrain pieces, space terrain, space sectors, I don't know. You're making this board that's large, usually symmetrical. You've also got an individual player board that tracks a lot of things, so you really can't condense it. It's going to have, this looks like a prototype version. Anyway, well, but you can kind of say it's a prototype version, but it doesn't matter. It's going to track your position on certain tracks. It also is going to hold your agendas, which are these things that score. It's going to have some unnecessary but nice artwork, and keep track of lots of other things. There's also a large round board that actually, the sort of board that keeps track of the round. It's actually bigger than this. I'm wondering if I can find a file copy. I'm wondering why there's that there. Well, anyway, you can just believe me. Well, there you go. This one's a little bit more like what you have in the game, although mine, those spots are square, not round, so maybe this is another prototype. The box itself is also quite large, so it's not deceiving you. It definitely promises to be epic in terms of space. There you can see it next to the Anachrony big box, which is also quite big. It is a big game. It's fun to play. I really like Voidfall. It's one I don't get to play very much because, I mean, you can see those rule books. And the setup is needlessly complex. The setup is very difficult, especially using the components that come in the box. I've upgraded some of mine so that my cards are stored in an organized fashion, and so that my ships don't constantly fall apart. There's our player board. You can kind of see how that is. It's kind of nice because your character sheet slides in, so it keeps, it's each of those different character sheets has different abilities and different bonuses it's going to get, and so it's important to have this large player sheet, but it is very big. Anyway, it's one that I don't get to play nearly as much as I want, and its size is definitely an issue, but it's a great one. If you've got the time and somebody to teach you, or even better, somebody who will set it up for you, check out Voidfall. Anyway, that's going to be it for this week on Wednesday Whimsy. I've enjoyed talking about these Table Hog games. I'm going to go upstairs and continue to tinker with Galactic Cruise. I'm learning it solo right now, just so that I can try the solo version, and so far it's been pretty good. We'll see how it shakes out. I'm looking forward to trying that one again, too. I might have to talk about that one on a future episode of Wednesday Whimsy because I'm having so much fun with it. But, hey, I guess we started and ended with a space game today. How about that? Anyway, I'm droning on, so I'm going to end things here. I'm going to wish you safe travels, courage when you need it, and I hope to see you back again next time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.